All right, in this last video, I want to talk a little bit about uh, the resource that we are using for our front end templating language called Handlebars. Um, the site to Handlebars is Handlebars.js, and there's a lot of things, a lot of different front end frameworks you can use to build out your front end of your website. By far, the most popular right now is React.js. There's VII, and these are all component-based frameworks, and we'll have some more discussion about that. We have a whole video series on React in the foreseeable future, but for right now, Handlebars is just an easy way or a quick way that we can take some of our data from the back end and display it in the front end, and it gives us a kind of a strict syntax that we need to use to display data. What I like to do is I like to look at the language guide, and it gives you some examples of how you would actually use handlebars. And so let's say, for instance, this is coming back from our back end of our routes. We can specify it by using these double brackets by giving it the name of the key. So we have an object here, and this object has first name and last name, and the values are specified here in green. But when we go to use this in our front end, we could just say first name and last name, but we have to give it the double squiggly brackets. So let's take a look at this here in our application. So here in our database.js file, we have a function that says get all items. Now, here, I'm going to uncomment this here. And if I were to execute get all items here, it would output before I actually render. Let's do this here. We have to do it before it renders back to the client. It's going to output each item within the row that it returns from our database table. And then it's going to bring back, or it's going to return what we call an array of objects. That's what rows is storing. So here, let's save this, Control S, and let's go back to our site, and let's go ahead and just refresh. So if we go back to our site, we'll see that we have sugar, honey buns, cereal, and we're just basically getting each item. Now, if we were to, let's comment this out again. And let's just do a console.log rows. And with this here, we should get what we consider an array of objects. So if we save this now, we go back and we refresh, and we go back to our web page. Here's our array. So we know it's an array because of the bracket, open and close bracket, but in the nest within that open and close bracket, we have 3 objects, and each of these objects have 3 different key value pairs. The keys are item ID, item name, and then item count. Now, what we want to do is okay, how do we use the documentation of the site from handlebars.js to figure out how we use this in our front end? So we'll look at one of the reasons why I like Handlebars is that it gives you plenty of examples to learn from. So the one that, let's see here, scroll down. The one that may be more helpful to us here, I think there's one that's very similar. Yeah, this one here may be something that's very closely related to what we're doing. Let's see here if there's other ones. Because what we're going to do is we want to loop through and iterate through our array of objects. and output it to the front. And so if we look at our index.hbs file, you'll see that I have this syntax each rows, and I close it off with each. So what's going to happen is it's going to loop through and output each of the rows that is being returned from my database. And so, and this is just the syntax that we need to use. How did I figure this out? Really trial and error and a little bit of Googling as well. But what was really helpful was this website, and this is kind of what got me started on the right path to figuring out how to use it. So here, where I have, this is kind of similar, where you have, this is just an object, and then you have an array of individual items. But I think the thing that was more similar to what we were doing, can't find it as of now, but the way you would loop through an array of objects would be to follow the syntax that you see here that I listed. So you would just say you'll return the actual object, that's the array of objects, and then you will use the this keyword, and then you will tug at the property or the key for this array of objects. And so, yeah, again, it takes some looking at, it takes observing the documentation code and how they did it, and just Googling some of these things. But nonetheless, this is probably by far one of the easiest ways to just format data that you're bringing in from the back end to your front end. So hopefully that made sense. What I want to do here is I want to add in a little bit of aesthetics, a little bit of functionality. So right now our app, when you add, let's go back to our site. When you add, let's say for instance, we want to add, let's say we want to add a pair, and we want to get 7 of those. When we click submit, nothing happens. We don't see the record showing up. But what I want to do is I want to make sure this record shows up once I press submit. So I'm going to play around with the routing and calling the various functions to do that. So let's see if we can get this to work. So I'm going to go back to my database.js. I'll go to my create item. And whenever I call this create item, I call this db.run function. Now what I want to do is I want to not only just create the item, but I want to display the get all items back to my home page because there's a new one that was been added. So I'm going to say get all items. I am going to pass in the response object. And actually, I'm not going to do it there. I am going to do it back in my app.js. And I'll pass in the rest here. I'll save that. And then in my database function, I'll pass in res. And I'm just going to brawl this real quick. And I will actually, I had the right idea. So I'll just go ahead and pass in get items, but I'm passing in res. So here I'll pass in res for get all items. And that should run as intended, where it's going to actually return this rendered index rows. So I'm kind of doing this on the fly, so let's see if it works here. So I'll save it. And let's go back to our page. And let's just say we want to add bread. We only want a quantity of 1. There we go. So it's working the way that I intend for it to work, where it's going to refresh and add new items. So let's add one more item, and let's say we want say ice cream, and let's put 1. Yep, and there we go. So that's working. And then I think the only thing we need to do is when we delete it, we'll be able to have it reflect that way as well. So let's end the video here. Hopefully this made sense. I am going to post this link within the video description, but also I'll post it in the PowerPoint that I've been using, which is this PowerPoint here. You can find it at this URL, and I'll find somewhere to post the link to the repository where you can actually observe the code. So have a good one.